Okay, so all the arguments for God that we've examined so far have been a priori arguments. They've relied on reasoning alone as justification for their conclusions, not on appeals to experience, okay, not on sense data. Now let's look at some arguments for the existence of God that use inductive reasoning, that are a posteriori arguments that rely on our observations of things, our experiences of things, okay? This is called inductive reasoning when we do this. When we rely on our experiences to draw conclusions, we're using inductive reasoning. You do this all the time, okay? So imagine somebody says to you, hey, I've listened to every Metallica album and everyone features electric guitar as the primary musical feature. I've not heard the Metallica album about to be released, but I think it's safe to assume that, yeah, it's going to feature electric guitar as the primary musical instrument. Does that have to be the case? No, they could do like one of those unplugged things where it's acoustic guitar that's featured as the primary musical instrument. But it would be reasonable to conclude that after listening to, what is it, 10 albums or something like that, 10, 12 albums, and you see this pattern emerge where the electric guitar is the featured instrument. Seems reasonable to conclude, but you can't be 100% certain, but it does seem reasonable. Similarly, if you see somebody, Valerie, jumping up and down and laughing and saying, oh my God, this is so wonderful, you draw a conclusion, probably that something really good has happened to Valerie. Can you be 100% certain of that? No. Maybe there's somebody in the background pointing a gun at Valerie and saying, you better jump up and down and laugh and say, oh my God, this is so wonderful. In which case something really bad would be happening to Valerie. But you feel like you can draw this conclusion that it's Valerie's actually happy and not being forced to do this under threat because you think this is the best explanation. And we've talked about this before. You go to the conclusion that you think best explains what's happening here. Okay, so you go out to your car in the morning, you put the key in it and you turn it and nothing happens. What is causing your car to not start? Could be a dead battery. Could be a stolen battery. Could be that somebody opened your hood and cut the battery cables. Maybe lightning hit the car and the battery went kaput. Or maybe there's a miracle occurring and God is preventing your car from starting so that you don't get injured driving away down the road. Now, all of these are possible, right? Just like with the sock grabber thing we talked about some ways back. Yes, all of these are possible explanations, but you know what the best one to start with is. It's just the dead battery, because it requires the least number of assumptions for you to have, and it's something that happens more frequently than people having their battery stolen or having their battery cables cut. Those things do happen, but you know that it's probably more likely to go with the dead battery explanation, even though you can't be 100% certain that's the case. Now think about this. This lecture I'm giving, it seems somewhat organized. I mean, you can at least follow what I'm saying. And I'm using grammatically correct sentences, right? And there's a theme to it. In other words, there's patterns going on here that have meaning to them. How did these things come to be? One explanation is I just threw darts at a dartboard and took whatever words the dart hit and put them into the PowerPoint. Another explanation is I dropped my computer into water and it malfunctioned and came up with this PowerPoint lecture. Another is maybe a chimpanzee did it. Another is maybe I just randomly tapped the keys with my feet and all of this came out the way that it did. And of course, the other explanation is I'm sitting here and thinking about what it is that I want to say to you and how I think I need to organize it so that you can understand it. What's the best explanation for this PowerPoint existing as it does as an understandable thing, right? That would be the one I would suggest to you. Now, some folks are going to extend this same kind of thinking about what's probably true based on what we know to this question of God. And I gave you this statement on your thought primer, and I asked you, is this a true or false statement? And the statement is, if the odds of our universe and its life-enabling features to come into existence out of chance are nearly zero, then it's reasonable to believe that some kind of supernatural force created the universe. So I'll be really curious to see how you answered that question. Is it true, you think? If it is really true that the odds of our universe coming together in the way that it did and enabled life to exist as it does is almost impossible to happen. Almost impossible, almost zero. Is it reasonable then to conclude that there must have been some sort of a supernatural force that caused things to come together in the way that they did? And that's what we'll start to look at, are some arguments that say, yeah, that's reasonable, and here's why.